procurement nerd, just in case anyone was wondering. So when you start working with government and dealing with government contracts and being a maker, you kind of, the nerdist starts becoming embedded. So it works beautifully with the kind of open government work that we've been doing. So I just want to talk to you about the sort of open by design, and for me, like as an information designer, open by design is something that is just in my DNA, and it has been for all the work that we do is collaborative, and we've also been introducing participatory design into the New South Wales government, so we did that back in 2012, and I'll talk about that project in a second. So really for us, all the work we do is around environment and social projects and issues, and we're pretty passionate about that. And also it's driving public participation and also ensuring that we maintain our access to information as we design digital services. We don't lose the information that's out there, because once things move from paper into digital, it's really easy to lose things. And I'll talk to you about some of those examples. So I just wanted to give you, this is Common Ground. So Common Ground is Australia's New South Wales first open government information service designed specifically for community, with community and industry, environmentalists. It was a whole bunch of people, environmental groups, and also activists, and Aboriginal communities were involved as well. So it was taking all of the information that the department had at the time around mining and production, and it was around the time that coal seam gas was being introduced into New South Wales in 2010, and many people had no idea what was going on across the state. All this information about what the mining licences were being planned and what was actually happening were in lots and lots of different information services across many different departments. And so what we did was brought it all together in a way where it was designed specifically for people in the community to find out what was happening around them, what companies behind it, and also to understand their place in the process, of the decision-making process. So we had lots and lots of different types of data coming together. Some of it was open data, and some of it was actually just kind of locked away in different departments. So one of the things that we were trying to do was actually bring to life and connect things like the expiration license conditions in a place where people understood what it meant and relevant to the actual mining license. So it opened up a whole bunch of information that was locked away in these databases that took about 12 clicks to get into. So it was a radical project for its time, and it was something that we made this back in 2012. It's still alive, like it's still out there. It was launched in 2014, and it's testament to its sort of success that the Minister for Resources and Energy at the time took it across to planning and environment. So it's great that it's kind of lasted the distance with a lot of digital services doing. So one of the things that was actually really important for us was creating all of this there was a lack of knowledge around how government processes were working, particularly how decisions were being made. And not only that, but also what all this data meant and where was it sort of like in the kind of bigger picture. So what we did when we started designing Common Ground was we put together this, I'm a bit of a process nerd as well, so self-confessed. We wanted to create a process story. And this poster became a really powerful way for us to structure the information, and it also was a fantastic engagement tool. So when we didn't know a lot, so we were going out and talking to lots of people about who were information, or the experts, people in the communities, people from different departments, around what was important to them and what the process from their perspective was. So this is a very high level overview. The story we were trying to tell here was when public participation and engagement and consultation was actually meant to happen, because a lot of companies weren't doing it. So where you see the little people, it's a highlight that that's where things are meant to happen. The other thing that we were wanting to highlight was where people could access the environmental reports, so when environmental assessments were done, and also just like when money was paid, and there's sort of like what agencies were involved. We were working with Trade and Investment at the time. This is a whole of government story. It's really hard for governments to design for whole of government, and so this was really one of those ways where we felt we could bring all that information together in a meaningful way. So throughout the top part of the process, it's all was trade and investment, and this is all planning and environment. So that it was kind of people in the Department of Trade and Investment really didn't have much to do with this kind of part of the process. Seeing this play out was one of the other things that we did when we were making Common Ground was an interactive version. So it was actually not just presenting the information, giving that next level of detail so people understood what those different steps were, but also we wanted to explain all of these crazy acronyms that happen in government as well. So a lot of what we do is de-jargoning and acronym busting. So always explaining stuff. And so particularly with data and knowledge, it's whenever you see a data point, it has a little dictionary or it has a little explainer that usually travels with it. So for us, that's enormously helpful and essential in terms of explaining things, but also having this sort of the interactive pathway was a way to help people navigate this kind of crazy journey, but also get to the information that they needed across a number of different websites and government organisations. One of the most powerful kind of outcomes, I think, for Common Ground and our process storytelling and being open about process was that at this point down here was the first time when the broader community actually understood that mining and production was going to happen. That was the environmental impact statement stage, when everything's up there, it's published for 45 days in order for people to give feedback on it. So as you can see, that happens kind of all the way down here, the Department of Planning, and there's years of investment and effort that's gone into a mining license or production application. And so it's only at this point when there might be a bandicoot who's at risk of extinction that the project is actually going to stop. Like the broader community has not been involved in that process. And so the minister at the time, who now moved across to planning, created this whole other stage, which is strategic release. So that was really kind of responding to the fact that once everyone saw the process out there, we're like, actually there's something really broken with that. We really need to be talking to people at this, earlier stage, and then by the time we get down here, at least people can be better informed and we're being, a bit more open about it, and that they're being part of the process. So for me, we're working on this project called, it's a movement, but it's a project as well, but Open Process, because we realise there's lots of different government processes, there's lots of different decision-making pathways that would be great to be out there and allow people to really understand and kind of feel much more connected to what's happening around them. So whether it's a mining licence pathway or policy, it could be an infrastructure project, it could be a specific mining project. So these are all the kind of data stories and process stories that we're starting to tell, and this is locally and globally. So we're pretty excited about having a whole bunch of different process stories, so we can talk about that a bit later. I just wanted to touch on one of the other projects. So in terms of the community engagement, public participation. So we work with government departments to help them bring their content and their stories to life in order to engage people to be part of that decision-making process. So one of the projects that we did was for Transport for New South Wales. This is the Future Transport Strategy. And they wanted to do a living strategy. So be taking on information and feedback from the community about the plans and the strategies as they went. So we're creating a bunch of content to bring their sort of policies and the why they were doing, why do we need to be thinking about the future in different ways, which is, one of the reasons was the rapid change of technology, bringing their data to life in a way where it matches with their policies, and also creating just engaging visuals where people could understand what's Sydney going to be looking like, and creating these content assets which were going to cross channels as well. So people were hopefully, rather than seeing something that looks like this, be able to engage with information in a much more understandable way, and so they were able to kind of give feedback. And that was one of the issues with the information design, was often government departments don't allow themselves the time to design well, and unfortunately, that's where a lot of the work we do is go in and collaborate with them and help them kind of think these things through at a very early stage. But we'll get to the content crisis in a moment. So one of the things that we did was we kind of went in, most of the work that we do, when we go in, we don't actually know what people need. And part of the work is actually working that stuff out. Like, who are the audiences? What are people's needs? Like, what are the business objectives? What does the government actually want to do? And what do citizens want? What do the citizens want to contribute as well? So it's really hard for us in terms of like a procurement framework to kind of go, well, you know, we think we need 100 infographics or some things. And in the end, once we get cracking, we can actually create quite a lot. And in the end, we created 700 something assets for transport, and that is across a number of different drafts of documents that are going out to the public, feedback's coming in. So there's a whole bunch of information and content and knowledge that's generated through that process that generally just, who knows what happens to it? And that's one of the points that I'll get to in a moment. The other project that we're working on, that May and I have been working on with the New South Wales Chief Data Scientist Data and Analytics Centre, is looking at developing trust and confidence and participation in data sharing and also the uses of advanced technologies. So this is something that we've been kind of in deep, doing a lot of talking to people and research around it. We're going to provide some recommendations, and we're also designing some workshops to get people from different inside government and outside government together to talk about how data sharing and how we can build trust and participation, not only in government sharing data across agencies and jurisdictions, but also for us in the community to be able to participate in contributing our data to information or to decisions that affect us, and the development of evidence-based decision making and making sure that we can validate that data and we can validate that information. And the data sharing ecosystem, when people think about government sharing data, and this is one of the things we need to kind of get our heads around, is not just the individuals who are actually sitting in government. It's this whole ecosystem of people around the government as well. So it's not just the Department of Finance, it's not just Treasury, it's not that person sitting there. It's like there's this kind of ripple effect of everyone's kind of taking, contributing, sharing, using, and that there's an enormous amount of data that's kind of going out, and there's not a lot coming in, and there's some, I think, really essential data that's missing in this piece. So I'll just talk about the open government. So this is the pathway that we did for the OGP when Australia first introduced it. So I was one of the open government participants who were involved in sort of getting the first national action plans and putting together submissions. And one of the things that we did this poster because we wanted to explain the process for anyone who wasn't part of that, to kind of go, okay, so this is what happened and this is who was involved, and it used to link to where the information was. So all the like 200 plus submissions that everyone put together and all the thoughts and feelings and plus all the events that happened. And it was great. And it was really useful. The government used it because they used it for internal engagement. Civil society were using it, and we were also it was a really helpful piece of asset. Unfortunately, the content management system the department was changed, and all of the links are broken, and all of that information has disappeared. No one can find all those submissions, and this is a really basic 101 open government. Access to information people, and they are not, unfortunately, designing for the future. So I think this is a really big issue we come up with quite a lot, and one of the reasons why we do a lot of the advocacy work that we've been doing around service design. So I just want to touch on, like, a lot of the work we do is around public participation, community engagement, and getting people to contribute information. So through the kind of consultation periods or engagement, whatever you want to call it, information is gathered at each of these different points. So often this is like government documents that are being developed and designed, going out for consultation and coming back in, changes happen, the discussing opinion, the opinions, the advice giving. It's like, I want to know where all that information goes. Like, what happens to it? And I think that's something that we should be thinking about as open by design, is how can we be retaining that information and making use of it and making sure that it's not lost and that it's there so we can all reuse it too. I think that's one of the things that for me is how we reuse and can share that information for others is really important. So this is our content elephant, and part of the reason that we do the advocacy we do in terms of content design and information service design is to get people to really think about the focus is usually on the technology before the information. And so unfortunately, there's a whole bunch of people sitting around going, do we need a website? You know, no, we need a game. And it's like, it's not an app, it's not a website. We're actually making information services. And there's this notion of websites are out there, it's done and dusted, and no one's really thinking about what's going to happen at its life or what's going to happen at the end of life with that information and that knowledge that's been gathered. So I think coming back to information services and us really talking quite strongly about our role and your role as information designers, managers, and knowledge managers. What your role in this is, because I think it's so crucial that we are involving you in the service design and the content design and those decisions. And I'm out there advocating for that, and I'd love to hear your ideas. One of my questions is related to that at the end. So the other thing, just in terms of what we, knowledge management and information that we're capturing is really around when we're going out and talking to people, we're capturing sentiments, we're collecting ideas. And a lot of that information is lost because there isn't somewhere for us to put our research in order to share it with other service designers or with other departments. So that's one of the open government submissions that we've been putting forward and really advocating for over the last number of years, because we want our information to be reused and leveraged by the projects. The content strategy piece of work, I think that, I'm not sure if anyone's really familiar with content strategy, but that for me is the place where information managers and knowledge managers, that's a natural place for you to be, is being involved in that kind of strategic thinking about content strategy. And that's something that's becoming more and more common in a number of different sort of government departments thinking about digital design. So this is the pathway that most websites, digital products and information services go. So there's all this kind of CapEx, the procurement happens, there's a whole bunch of like kind of building a digital something, and it's having a template, we shove stuff into a template. Someone might actually talk to some people and do some research, and someone like, oh yeah, we might want to think about the content. Maybe, maybe not. Data, if you're designing maps using data, generally, like people will go, oh yeah, we need a map. And they're like, okay, so where's your data? They might think about it, they generally don't. They think about an engagement release plan. They're like, oh cool, we need social media, we're going to put $600,000 on that for advertising. No one's thinking about their content, they're just thinking about the advertising spend. Then you get to the website and they've been using dummy content, and then they get to the point just before publishing, they go, okay, so where's the content? So who are we talking to, what do we want to say, and actually what do we want people to do with the content, really? So that's where we come in. So we're known as the content crisis queens at the NOC, because that's generally when we get the call. And I would much prefer to be not getting the call there. I'd much prefer to be doing things the way that we like to be doing them, which is way up the front. The other thing is, once things are published, there's the measure, there's the feedback, it's like what happens to that information, who knows? And generally, these projects move into operation and expenditure, and once it moves into there, it's kind of like a death knell of everything. It's like a lot of that's the first thing to go when it comes to budgeting. So in our experience when we've been making things, because we kind of get in here and firefight, what often happens is no one's really thinking about what's going to happen to all this information at the end. And so when these projects finish, or campaigns, or information changes based on feedback, it's all gone. We're not designing for that information to be retained and to be shared, and we're not designing really for open access to information. It's lost in the system. So for me, this is it's a crucial piece of the work that we're doing. And I've been telling this story quite a lot to a lot of government agencies, and they look at this and they go, oh yeah. And so they're starting to really think about it and really see the impact of how they're procuring services and how they're making things. And I think that the more that we can talk about the problem, but also talk about, hey, this is what we could be doing instead, and this is when we can be getting more people involved, it would be a really powerful thing. So that's being in a nutshell. And my questions for you are, what processes do you think government should be more open about? And how can the information and knowledge management community be more involved in service design?
Okay. Thank you, Mel. So, what's next, ladies?